The old dark blue Ford pickup made a sharp, embarrassing squeal as Michael Reed turned into the student drop-off lane at St. Augustine Academy. The sound was loud enough to make several parents turn their heads. Among the polished Mercedes, Range Rovers, and Cadillac Escalades lined up in front of the school, Michael's 20-year-old truck looked like something that had wandered into the wrong world. The driver's door had a deep dent. The paint near the back had peeled in several places. A rusty steel toolbox sat in the bed of the truck, and a small crack still ran across the lower corner of the windshield because Michael had not had the time or money to replace it. He turned off the engine, but the truck kept shaking for a few seconds before finally going quiet. Beside him, 8-year-old Lily Reed held her purple backpack tightly against her chest and looked through the window. A group of parents stood near the front gate, holding expensive coffee cups, dressed as if they had stepped out of a magazine. Every now and then, their eyes drifted toward Michael's truck. Michael noticed the look on his daughter's face. He had seen it more often in recent weeks. Lily never said she was ashamed of him. She would never say something like that. But children do not have to say everything for a parent to understand. Michael saw it in the way she waited for other kids to walk past before opening the door. He saw it in the way she sometimes asked him to drop her off near the end of the block instead of directly in front of the school. And he saw it in the way she no longer ran to hug him in front of everyone when he picked her up in the afternoon. Michael did not blame her. He knew how strong an 8-year-old could be when she was sitting beside her father, and how fragile she could feel the moment she stepped into a world that kept reminding her she was different. He looked at the clock. 7:43. He had to be at the garage by 8:15. If traffic was kind, he would make it. He turned to Lily, straightened the collar of her uniform, and reminded her that she had a math test that morning. Lily nodded. Michael smiled and told her he believed she would do great. She opened the truck door. At that exact moment, a woman's voice floated across the drop-off lane. It was not shouted, but it was just loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Victoria Langford looked at Michael's old truck and told the woman beside her that the school should really consider creating a separate entrance for maintenance workers, just to protect the image of the academy. A man nearby turned his face away, trying to hide his smile behind his coffee cup. Michael heard it. Lily heard it too. Her small hand tightened around the strap of her backpack. Michael stepped out of the truck. He was still wearing his gray work jacket with the Henderson Auto Repair logo on the chest. There was a dark smear of engine grease on one sleeve from the job he had finished late the night before. He walked around to Lily's side, knelt in front of her, and tied her shoelace. He did not look at Victoria. He did not answer her. He only told Lily not to rush the last question on her math test, because the easiest questions were sometimes the ones people got wrong when they stopped paying attention. Lily nodded. She walked a few steps toward the school, then turned back. Michael gave her a thumbs up. She tried to smile, then disappeared through the tall front doors of St. Augustine Academy. Michael stood there until she was gone. Then he turned back to his truck. As he opened the door, he heard Victoria speak again. She said scholarships were a beautiful idea on paper, but sometimes people needed to ask whether certain children truly belonged in the environment they had been placed in. This time, Michael stopped, only for 1 second. His hand tightened on the door handle. Then he got into the truck and drove away. Victoria Langford watched the old Ford leave, then returned to her conversation as if nothing had happened. She had no idea that the man she had just mocked had a connection to St. Augustine Academy deeper than almost every parent standing beside her, and Michael wanted to keep it that way, at least for now. 4 years earlier, Michael Reed's life had been different. He still worked with his hands. He still drove the old pickup. He still lived in a small house on the edge of town. But back then, every evening when he came home, Emily was there. Emily Reed was the kind of woman who could make a small room feel warm simply by walking into it. She was not rich. She was not famous. She did not have the kind of career that made strangers impressed. Emily was an elementary school teacher. She loved old books, strange-looking tea mugs, and buying more colored pencils than any teacher could possibly need. When Lily was born, Emily told Michael that the one thing she wanted most was for their daughter to grow up never believing that a person's worth was measured by the money in their bank account. Michael laughed and said that with their salaries, they would probably have no trouble teaching that lesson. Those were the days when they could still laugh about money. 2 years later, Emily started getting tired in a way that did not feel normal. At first, she blamed work. And finally, the word that changed everything: cancer. For almost 2 years, Michael worked during the day and cared for Emily at night. He learned the names of medications he had never heard of before. He knew which hours were hardest for her. He knew when she was truly sleeping and when she was only closing her eyes so Lily would not see her cry. Some nights, Michael sat alone in his truck in the hospital parking lot with both hands on the steering wheel, not crying, not speaking, just sitting there because he did not know what else to do. Emily died on a quiet morning in October. Lily was only 4 years old. During her final months, Emily knew she would not be there to watch her daughter grow up, so she wrote letters. One for Lily's 10th birthday, one for her high school graduation, one for her wedding day, if that day ever came. But there was one thing Emily said to him that she never wrote down. A few weeks before she passed, she asked Michael to promise her something. If, after the medical bills and debts, there was anything left, she wanted him to use part of it to help a child go to school. Just one child, she said, one would be enough. Emily believed that not every child was born standing in front of the same door. But sometimes, if one person opened that door, everything on the other side of a child's life could change. After Emily died, Michael received money from her life insurance policy and a medical settlement that was finalized later. It did not make him rich, but it was more money than Michael had ever had at one time. His lawyer advised him to pay off debt, move into a better house, and invest the rest. Michael did some of that. He paid the most urgent debts. He set aside money for Lily's future. But then he remembered the promise he had made to Emily. Michael went to St. Augustine Academy. It was one of the best private schools in the region. Emily had passed by it many times and once said she wished smart children from poor families could walk through those gates too. Michael met with the principal, Margaret Ellis. Their first meeting lasted almost 3 hours. When Michael left, the Emily Reed Hope Fund began to exist. At first, the fund could only help a few students. Michael placed part of the insurance money into it, then continued contributing a portion of his income every year. One of Emily's old friends found out and donated, then a former parent donated, then a local business. Michael was not the only person who gave money to the fund, but he was the one who created it and kept it alive during its hardest early years. He had only one condition. Emily's name could be attached to the fund, but no one could know that Michael had founded it. He did not want Lily to be treated differently. He did not want gratitude. He only wanted to keep his promise to his wife. When Lily was old enough to apply to St. Augustine, she passed the entrance assessment with excellent scores. Michael still insisted that she go through the normal admissions process. He did not even tell Lily about the fund. To Lily, her father was just a mechanic. A mechanic who woke up at Nam Jo Bamui food every morning, could fix almost anything with an engine, cooked spaghetti too soft, and often forgot to buy fabric softener. Michael wanted his daughter to love him for those things, not because of a secret, but secrets have a cost, and that cost became harder to pay when Lily became a target. Madison Langford was in Lily's class. Victoria Langford was one of the most influential parents at St. Augustine. Her husband, Charles Langford, ran a real estate development company. The Langfords lived in a mansion with an indoor pool and appeared at every major charity event in town. Victoria sat on the parent committee. She had helped fund part of the school's new tennis courts, and she never missed a chance to remind people of it. To Victoria, St. Augustine was not just a school, it was a club, a symbol of status, and the growing presence of students receiving financial aid made her uncomfortable. Victoria never said directly that poor children should not be there. She was smarter than that. She talked about protecting the school's culture. She talked about fit. She said families who could not keep up with the social expectations of the community might make their children feel out of place. Polite words. Hiding one simple belief. People like Michael and Lily did not belong there. Children learn quickly from adults. Within weeks, Madison began to change. She asked Lily why her father's clothes were always dirty, why their truck was so old, why Lily had not gone skiing in Aspen over winter break. One day, when the class talked about their parents' jobs, Lily proudly said her father could fix any car. Madison laughed and said her father only had to make a phone call, and people like Michael would come fix cars for him. A few children laughed. Lily did not tell her father, but she became quieter. One afternoon, Michael arrived early to pick her up and saw her standing alone near the steps while Madison handed out birthday cupcakes to a group of girls. Michael asked why she was not with them. Lily said she did. That night, while doing laundry, Michael found a birthday invitation torn in half inside her jacket pocket. He didn't ask. He taped it back together and saw that the birthday party had already passed. A week later came the midterm parent meeting. Michael took half a day off from the garage. But that morning, an important customer had trouble with a delivery truck. If the garage did not finish the repair on time, the owner could lose a major contract. Michael stayed 2 extra hours. By the time he arrived at St. Augustine, he was still wearing his work jacket. He had washed his hands, but the grease that had settled deep into his skin did not disappear with soap. Michael walked into the main lobby. A new receptionist looked at him and quickly said the air conditioning problem was in the east wing and the maintenance room was downstairs. Michael had not even answered when laughter came from behind him. Victoria Langford was standing with 2 other parents. She said perhaps the school had finally called someone to fix the heating system. The receptionist's face turned red when Michael explained that he was there for the parent meeting. Victoria raised an eyebrow. She looked him up and down and said St. Augustine had certainly become much more diverse in recent years. It sounded like a compliment. No one understood it that way. Michael walked past her. He went to Lily's classroom and sat in the last row. During the meeting, Lily's teacher, Rachel Moore, reviewed the students' progress. Lily was at the top of the class in reading comprehension and among the top 3 in math. Michael smiled. He did not know that across the room, Victoria was watching him. When the meeting ended, Ms. Moore asked Michael to stay behind. She told him Lily was a wonderful student, but lately she had been participating less in group activities. Michael asked if something had happened. The teacher hesitated. There was no clear evidence of serious bullying, only small comments, being left out, quiet jokes, things that were difficult to put into an official report, but more than enough to make an 8-year-old wake up every morning not wanting to go to school. Michael thanked her. When he left the classroom, he saw Lily standing at the end of the hallway. Madison and 2 other girls were nearby. Michael had not reached them yet when he heard Madison call Lily a charity girl. Another girl asked what that meant. Madison explained that charity kids were children allowed to go to the school because other people felt sorry for them. Lily stood still. Michael felt heat rise in his chest. He stepped forward, but before he reached them, Lily saw him. She immediately smiled as if nothing had happened. Michael understood. His daughter was protecting him from her own pain. That night, Lily barely touched dinner. 2 days later, Michael found an envelope at the bottom of the trash can in her bedroom. It was an invitation to perform at St. Augustine's annual fundraising gala. Lily had been chosen to read an essay she had written. Michael asked why she had not told him. Lily looked down and said she did not want to do it anymore. Michael asked why. She stayed silent for a long time. Then she said something that kept him awake that night. She said maybe things would be easier if he didn't come. Michael didn't get angry. He didn't demand names. He sat on the floor beside her bed. Lily started crying and apologized. She said she loved him. She said she was not ashamed of him. But every time he came to school, the other kids talked about the truck, his clothes, and his job. Michael held his daughter. A part of him wanted to call Margaret Ellis immediately and tell her to reveal everything. One phone call. One announcement. One plaque with his name on it, and all those people would stop talking. But then he remembered why he had kept the secret in the first place. He did not want Lily's value in other people's eyes to change only because they discovered her father was connected to a scholarship fund. If they only respected her after knowing the truth, then their respect was not worth much. Michael told Lily a story about Emily. Years earlier, when her mother was a new teacher, there was a boy in her class who always wore the same coat. Other children teased him because it smelled. Emily found out that his family lived in a house without a washing machine, and his mother washed clothes by hand after working night shifts. Emily did not buy the boy a new coat in front of the class. Instead, she quietly organized a clothing exchange program for the whole school so no child would know who needed help. Michael told Lily that was who her mother was. Emily never wanted kindness to make the person receiving it feel smaller. Lily asked if her mother had ever been embarrassed that her father was a mechanic. Michael laughed. He said Emily loved his grease-stained hands because those hands always fixed her car for free. Lily laughed through her tears. Michael asked if she wanted him to come to the gala. Lily was quiet. Finally, she nodded. Michael promised he would be there. Meanwhile, behind closed doors at St. Augustine, another problem was unfolding. The school's student support program was facing a serious funding gap. A major donor had pulled out after their business collapsed. Without additional money, at least 9 students could lose support the following school year. Margaret Ellis had spoken with Michael weeks earlier. Michael did not have enough personal money to cover the entire gap. But he had spent many evenings calling people who had known Emily, former students, and local businesses. He convinced an auto parts chain to contribute. One of Emily's former students gave a large donation. Michael even used part of his personal investments as security to keep the fund operating until a long-term plan could be built. The upcoming fundraising gala had originally been planned as the night the school would announce that the program had been saved. Michael still asked Margaret not to mention his name, but Margaret had begun to question whether that promise was still right after what she was seeing happen to Lily. 3 days before the event, Victoria Langford walked into the principal's office. She offered a large donation for the new athletic center. But the money came with a few suggestions. Victoria wanted the school to reconsider its scholarship criteria. She said families receiving support should be able to prove they could participate in the school's community culture. Margaret asked what that meant. Victoria talked about trips, extracurricular activities, fundraising events, the school's public image. Margaret understood exactly what she meant. Victoria wanted fewer people like Michael. The conversation ended coldly. Victoria left the office without knowing Margaret Ellis had already made a decision. The fundraising gala arrived on a Saturday night. The grand hall of St. Augustine was decorated with golden lights, white flowers, and round tables covered in linen. Outside, valet attendants collected keys from one luxury car after another. A reporter from the local newspaper was there. A small television crew had also come because the school would be announcing the future of its scholarship program. Victoria arrived in an expensive black dress. Charles Langford. Madison wore white and kept glancing toward Lily. Lily was backstage, holding the paper with her essay on it. She kept looking at the clock. Her father was not there yet. Across town, Michael was lying under a delivery van. A family on their way to visit someone in the hospital had broken down near the garage. The garage was already closed, but Michael had stayed. He knew if he left them there, they might wait 2 hours for a tow truck. He checked his watch again and again. He finished the repair as quickly as he could, washed his hands, changed clothes in the break room, and drove the old Ford to the school. By the time Michael arrived, the program had already been going for 20 minutes. He was wearing an old navy suit he had bought years earlier for his brother's wedding. It was tight in the shoulders. His shoes were worn. A small mark of grease remained on his thumb, no matter how hard he had scrubbed. Michael stepped into the lobby. Victoria saw him almost immediately. She was standing with a group of parents near the entrance to the hall. Michael tried to walk past. Victoria moved slightly and blocked his way. She asked if he was sure he was at the right event. Michael said his daughter was performing tonight. Victoria smiled. "Of course," she said. Then, in front of the people around them, Victoria began talking about families who always received but never contributed. She said a community could not survive if some people kept paying while others simply benefited. Michael looked at her. He said he was not there to argue. He only wanted to watch his daughter perform. Victoria did not stop. Maybe it was the champagne. Maybe it was because she was used to no one challenging her. She said scholarship programs were destroying the school's standards. She said sometimes kindness only created the illusion that everyone belonged everywhere. A few parents began to look uncomfortable. Charles quietly told his wife to stop, but Victoria had seen Lily. The little girl had just stepped out from backstage to look for her father. Victoria said, loudly enough for Lily to hear, that not every child wearing a St. Augustine uniform truly belonged at St. Augustine. Lily froze. Michael turned and saw his daughter. In her eyes, he saw the same expression he had seen in the truck every morning. But this time, there were tears. Madison stood nearby. She looked at her mother, then at Lily, and said, maybe her mom was right. Maybe Lily was only there because rich people had paid for her. Lily ran. Michael turned back to Victoria. For months, he had stayed silent. When people laughed at his truck, he stayed. When they looked at his hands as if engine grease was something shameful, he stayed silent. But now, his voice changed. He did not shout. That was what made everyone around him go quiet. Michael told Victoria never to speak about his daughter as if she were a debt owed by the school. Victoria stared at him for a moment, then laughed. She asked what he had ever contributed to St. Augustine besides parking that old truck in the drop-off lane every morning. Michael did not answer. He turned to find Lily. Victoria called a security guard nearby and said Michael was causing a scene. The guard hesitated. At that exact moment, the sound of a microphone came from inside the hall. Principal Margaret Ellis was standing on the stage. She asked everyone to return to their seats. Several people had witnessed the confrontation in the lobby. Word spread quickly. The atmosphere inside the hall became strange and tense. Michael found Lily in the hallway behind the stage. She was crying. He knelt and held her. Lily said she did not want to read anymore. Michael told her they could go home right then if she wanted. She did not need to prove anything to anyone. Lily looked at him and asked a question that felt like a blade in his chest. She asked, "Dad, do I belong here?" Michael told her she did not belong at St. Augustine because of a piece of paper, a scholarship, or because someone allowed her in. She belonged wherever her talent, her hard work, and her heart carried her. No one had the right to take that from her. Lily wiped her tears. She looked down at the wrinkled paper in her hand. Then she said she wanted to read. Michael walked her back toward the stage. He planned to sit quietly in the last row, but when he entered the hall, Margaret Ellis was still holding the microphone. She said the program would change slightly. Before the performances continued, she wanted to speak about St. Augustine's scholarship program. Victoria sat near the front. She smiled faintly. Many people knew the Langford family had offered money for the athletic center. Victoria believed Margaret was about to thank the school's major donors. Margaret began by speaking about a teacher named Emily Reed, a woman who had never worked at St. Augustine but believed education should not be a door that opened only for families holding a key made of money. Michael lifted his head. His expression changed. He looked at Margaret. She looked back at him. Michael gave a small shake of his head. This was their secret. Margaret continued. She said that 4 years earlier, after Emily passed away, a man had walked into her office. He had not worn a suit. He had worn jeans and a work jacket. He said he did not have enough, but he wanted to keep a promise to his wife by changing the world of at least one child. The hall went silent. Victoria was no longer smiling. Margaret said that man created the Emily Reed Hope Fund. Over 3 years, the fund had helped pay tuition, books, meals, and learning activities for 17 students. When the program nearly collapsed that year, that same man spent months raising money, calling local businesses, reaching out to former students, and even placing his own personal assets as security so the program could continue. Michael stood still at the back of the hall. Margaret said the man had never wanted his name revealed. She had promised to protect his privacy, but tonight, when kindness had been mistaken for weakness and wealth had been mistaken for dignity, she could not stay silent anymore. Margaret looked straight toward Michael. Then it was as if the entire hall needed time to understand. Then hundreds of eyes turned toward the back of the room. The man in the old suit, the worn shoes, and the hand still marked with grease stood alone near the door. Victoria turned around. Her face went pale. Margaret said Michael was not the only donor to the fund, but without him, the fund would not exist. And without his efforts in recent months, 9 students might not have returned to St. Augustine the following year. Someone began clapping. Then another person, then the entire hall stood. Michael did not smile. He did not wave. He only looked toward the side of the stage where Lily stood watching him, a reason directly connected to the words that had been spoken about students receiving help. Margaret did not say Victoria's name at first. She said that the previous year, several St. Augustine families had faced temporary financial difficulty. The Hope Fund included a confidential emergency support program. The identities of recipients were normally protected. But one family present that night had turned financial assistance into a weapon against others. Victoria stood up sharply. Charles looked at his wife. Margaret said she would not release private financial details, but she could confirm that the Langford family had once received temporary tuition support through a program backed by the Hope Fund during a cash flow crisis in Charles Langford's company. A wave of whispers spread across the hall. Victoria stood frozen. Charles closed his eyes. Victoria knew the school had allowed a delay and partial assistance, but she had not known where the guarantee came from. The woman who had called other children charity cases had once needed the very hand she had despised. Madison looked at her mother. Something in her face changed. For the first time, she understood that the things adults say can return like a mirror. Victoria walked toward Michael. She tried to say it was a misunderstanding, that her words had been taken out of context, that she cared only about the standards of the school. Michael looked at her. He was not angry anymore. Maybe he was simply too tired. He told her she did not need to apologize to him in front of a crowd. If she truly regretted what she had done, she could start by teaching her daughter that a person's worth was not measured by the car their parents drove to school. Then Michael walked past her. He went to Lily. She ran down from the side of the stage. Michael opened his arms and Lily rushed into them. The hall applauded again, but Michael barely heard it. Lily cried and asked why he had never told her about the fund. Michael said because it was her mother's story, not his medal. Lily asked if he had really used her mother's money to help other children. Michael said both he and Emily had done it. Emily had simply started first. That night, Lily still went on stage. The paper in her hand was wrinkled. Her voice shook at first, but then she looked down and saw her father sitting in the last row. Michael gave her the same thumbs up he gave her every morning at the school gate. Lily began to read more clearly. Her essay was called "The Strongest Hands I Know." She wrote about a father's hands, hands with small cuts, hands with grease under the fingernails, hands that were not soft or beautiful. But hands that tied her shoes, made breakfast, fixed the old truck, and held her on the nights when she missed her mother. Lily had written the essay weeks before she knew anything about the fund. When she finished reading, Michael lowered his head. For the first time that night, his eyes turned red. The video of Margaret's announcement spread the next morning. A parent had recorded almost the entire thing. The local paper ran the story with a headline about a single father mocked at his daughter's school before being revealed as the founder of a secret scholarship fund. Local television programs called. Michael refused most interviews. He agreed to only one short conversation on the condition that the story focus on the fund and the students who needed help. Within 2 weeks, the Emily Reed Hope Fund received more donations than it had in the previous 2 years combined. But what mattered most to Michael happened the Monday morning after the gala. The old Ford turned into the student drop-off lane again. The engine still squealed. The door still had a dent. Michael still wore his garage jacket. Several parents looked at him, but this time their eyes were different. Some smiled. Some waved. Some tried to approach and shake his hand. Michael answered politely but did not stay long. He turned to Lily. She opened the truck door immediately. She did not wait for other children to walk past. She did not ask him to stop down the block. Lily stepped out, then turned back. In front of everyone, she ran around to the driver's side. Michael rolled down the window. Lily hugged him through the open window and said she loved him. Michael smiled. He reminded her not to forget her science homework. Lily rolled her eyes and said she had already done it, then ran toward the gate. Madison was standing nearby. She looked at Lily. For a few seconds, neither girl said anything. Then Madison stepped forward and apologized. There was no grand speech. No tears, just the awkward apology of an 8-year-old child trying to repair something an adult had taught her wrong. Lily nodded. The two girls walked into school together. Victoria stood far away. She did not return to the parent committee the following semester. The Langfords remained wealthy. Charles still ran his company. Their lives did not fall apart. Michael did not want that. He had never wanted revenge. But Victoria lost something money could not immediately buy back, the respect of the people who had once stood near her and laughed at comments they pretended were harmless. A few months later, Michael received an envelope at the garage. Inside was a check made out to the Hope Fund. There was no long. The sender was Victoria Langford. Michael stared at the check for a long time. He didn't know whether Victoria had truly changed or whether she was only trying to ease her guilt. But in the end, he deposited the check into the fund. Because Michael understood something Emily had understood long ago. A good act does not need a perfect person behind it in order to matter. That year, the Hope Fund supported 6 more students. One was the son of a woman who worked night shifts at a hospital. Another lived with his grandparents after losing both parents. Another was a girl with the highest science scores in her public school district, but whose family could not afford the program she dreamed of attending. Michael did not meet all of them. The old Ford was still there. A friend told him he should buy a new truck. Michael said maybe next year, but the truth was, he was not ready to let go of it. It was the truck he had used to drive Emily to the hospital when Lily was born. It was the truck that brought all 3 of them home together for the first time. It was the truck Michael drove on the last day he brought Emily home from the hospital. Some things look old to everyone else but hold an entire life for the person who owns them. One afternoon near the end of the school year, Michael arrived early to pick up Lily. He stood beside the truck. A father who was new to the school walked over and asked if Michael was in charge of maintenance. Michael looked down at his garage jacket and laughed. He said no. He was just a father waiting for his daughter. The man apologized. Michael told him it was all right. A few minutes later, Lily ran out of the school gate holding a paper in her hand. It was her final report. She was first in reading and science. Michael pretended to be serious and asked where math was. Lily shouted that she was second in math and smacked him lightly on the arm. Michael laughed and hugged her. As they were about to get into the truck, Lily looked back at the school building. She asked if her mother knew about the children the fund had helped. Michael looked up at the evening sky. He did not know how to answer a question like that for an 8-year-old. Finally, he said that if Emily could see it, she probably would not care about the name of the building, the amount of money in the fund, or the newspaper articles. She would only want to know whether those children were doing well in class. Lily thought about that and said her mother would definitely ask about their grades. Michael laughed. Yes, that was exactly what Emily would do. The two of them climbed into the old truck. The engine started on the second turn of the key. The Ford slowly pulled away from St. Augustine Academy. The expensive cars still lined up behind it. Wealthy parents still stood near the gate. Not all of them were cruel. Not all rich people were arrogant. And not all struggling people were noble. Michael understood life was more complicated than simple stories, but he also understood that people had a dangerous habit. They looked at a car and guessed the value of the person driving it. They looked at clothing and guessed the story of the person wearing it. They looked at a job and decided who deserved to be heard. And sometimes they were completely wrong. Because the man stepping out of an old truck might be the one keeping the door open for 17 other children. The father with grease on his hands might have given more than the people wearing the most expensive suits in the room. And the little girl called a charity child might be the daughter of the man who helped other children sit in that same classroom. Michael never wanted people to stand and applaud for him. He only wanted to keep a promise to a woman who was no longer there to see it. But in the end, his secret taught St. Augustine a lesson that was not written in any of the school's textbooks. Real kindness usually does not make noise. It does not always walk into a room with cameras around it. It does not always wear beautiful clothes. It does not need its name carved into a wall. Sometimes, kindness drives an old pickup truck, wears a jacket stained with engine grease, stands at the back of a hall where no one is looking, and keeps doing the right thing, even when the people it helps never know the name of the person behind it. Michael looked at Lily in the rearview mirror. She was reading her report card again, smiling to herself. He thought of Emily. He thought of the promise he had made in that hospital room 4 years earlier. She had only asked him to help one child. Michael looked at his daughter and smiled. Maybe he had done a little more than promised, but he knew Emily would not complain.